Application window, title screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, today, thanks so much for inviting me for the Angular Kenya event. So, I'm gonna be speaking about design from the realm of open source. Yeah, let's get right into it. So, my name is Shodipo Ayomide. I do a whole bunch of open source. So, I have a couple of open source projects on the internet that you can contribute to, that you can take a look at. Also contribute to a lot of projects like from Facebook, from Gatsby, from Code Sandbox, from Google, from Netlify, and a whole bunch of lists as you can see here. And I'm also a developer advocate and community evangelist. So I organize a couple of conferences across Nigeria and Africa. So there's on Stack, there's Africa Hacks, there's Developer Circle Lagos on Facebook, there's React CTF Lagos, and there's Open Source Community Africa. Let's move forward. So, and lastly, about me, before I get into the good stuff, is also a media developer expert for Cloudinary and a technical instructor at Egghead. Now, let's get cooking the good stuff. So designers basically cannot get less creative. The more you produce design assets as a designer, the more creative you get over time. So you cannot get less creative as a designer working in open source or as a designer in general. The more you create design assets, the more you create designs, pages, the more you create more artboards, more different various kind of design, the more creative you get over time. It's just a whole process. Gathering this experience together is going. That's what exactly makes you a great designer. Yeah, before you can even get a role as a product designer or a graphics designer, but in this case, a product designer, you must have at least experience putting together design assets together and basically prototyping something. So, what exactly is the problem and why is this stuff relevant? That's what we want to get into real quick. So the problem is it's quite hard to find a single designer who contributes to open source efficiently. Before you find any designer saying, okay, I want to contribute some kind of code design to open source projects, you have to find them. The designers I know contribute to open source. They are less than three. I know, they are less than three that I know personally. I know Perry, I know Ariel Fox, and one other person I can't recall the name so well. So that they contribute to open source design, and because yeah, contribute to open source as a designer, starting out can be very intimidating and confusing based on the level of features you see already prepared with little or no documentation for designers. So contribute to open source as a designer can be very intimidating because when you visit certain open source projects, first thing we all do as open source contributors is we go to the readmes of the documentation of the project and we get to see how this project works and what exactly we can do in this project. Then we go there as designers and we see these things and we're like, okay, where do I start from as a designer? Like, where exactly do I start from? A lot of people are confused in this part because there is no documentation for designers, and that's wrong. Then they come around and they see a whole bunch of features with less or little or no documentation for designers, so they don't know, however, like how they can contribute. So what do? They just close the tab and just keep moving forward. So there's also this perception of designers not needed in open source, but just make it work ideology. So that's an ideology some people have that they don't really care about how it looks. All they care about is just make the feature work and let it be usable. If your product or startup is usable and it's not the UI is bad or the UX, the user experience while using your app is bad, your app wouldn't get so much traffic. So it doesn't make any sense you being able to have like a really great features and your UI and your UX is really bad. Then it makes no sense at all. So UI and the UX is really important when building any kind of product. Whatever kind of product it is very important. Now I'm gonna talk about the solution to all of these things, these two problems I just mentioned recently, and I'm going to talk about how exactly to solve them and what exactly designers are expecting from open source projects and people who run open source. First things first, we will need as designers, there's meant to be documentation towards how they can contribute to open source as designers. So in the documentation of that project, that's in the README file, there should be there should be a documentation based for designers saying, okay, so in this portion of this documentation, if as a designer you want to contribute to open source, read this part of the documentation that explains how this project works and how you can contribute and what exactly can be contributed to. So adding all those just basically documenting designs and how designers can contribute and not just focusing all the documentation to engineering and developers. So thanks to companies and initiatives like Open Source Design, Open Source Initiative, and others creating design-related content in relation to resources, in relation to open source. So Open Source Design they have a blog. They write articles based on design and open source. Open Source Initiative they also write articles and create resources like videos, articles, basically about open source on how designers can get contributing to open source. So the next thing that's going to solve all this problem is tools. So developers companies need to create more tools to help aid designers contribute to open source. So we need more tools created by companies. For example, we have Adobe, we have Figma, we have Sketch. So we have this other one that's really important. I don't want to forget the name, and I did. Okay, but remember, I'm going to just come over to it. So we have these design companies, and they all have developers in these companies. So I'm thinking about the way, what if all these design tools could communicate with each other? I just think about it. These companies need to come together and collaborate to create at least a tool that would aid every designer being able to contribute to open source easily. The right tools are not available for designers to contribute to open source. They're not available because most of these platforms, for example, GitHub, not every out of 100% of designers, let's say only 20 to 40% knows how to use GitHub and the terminal. Just 20 to 40, or probably even less. Most of designers don't know how because it wasn't built exactly for designers. So developers and companies need to come together and build tools that would aid designers being able to contribute to open source. So one other important thing that designers need to fix is before they can actually contribute to open source is designers need to understand how to communicate with developers, and also developers need to understand how to communicate with designers. So I'm not saying designers should like really code. That's not the aim of this talk. So no, that's not even the point. Designers should just know how to talk, speak their designs in a way developers will be able to understand. Because you can send your designs to developers, and they're like, okay, what exactly? I don't understand. How does this work? Can you explain this to me? Then the designer starts talking, and the developer is like, okay, I'm confused. Like, I don't get this. Then he has to look for another designer to come and help interpret what another designer is saying, so that that developer can understand. You're gonna hear all the stress people are gonna go through just because you cannot interpret. You cannot talk to a developer as a designer. That would be a problem. And also, as a developer, you must also know how to talk to a designer. Okay, you're having an issue with the UX the designer designed. You knowing how to communicate that issue with the designer is what exactly is going to help you in this case. So I'm going to talk more about getting started with OSS as open source software. So open source in a nutshell is a free software built by the community for the community with improvements shared across different technical talents. So you can screenshot this and tweet. You can also tag me. My handle is @developer.io. Once I see that, we'll definitely retweet. So open source in a nutshell is basically a free software on the internet that everyone can see, built by the community, and it's also going to be for the community with improvements shared across different technical talents. So different technical talent across different people, technical writers, designers, developers, basically any talent that at least that can be contributed to projects is value. The web has been open source since view page source. So since when Chrome introduced the feature called view page source, since then that's view page source and inspect element. Those two, the web has been open source since those two features were released on Chrome. So once you right click or on Mac, you use your two finger, just click down, you're going to have a drop down, then just click on view page source. Then if you do this on a website, you're going to get the preview of how basically the code of the website, basically just basic HTML. So that alone is a way to see it. You can't contribute directly on the view page source, but you can definitely see the code and know what exactly is going wrong somewhere. And you can DM the person who owns the website saying, okay, so I saw this in your HTML code after viewing view page source. If you can do this and this and this, I think the design will be much better. I believe it's going to look much better. If you also click on inspect elements, you can also view the CSS, you can view the HTML. You can also make changes in the HTML that are being reflected automatically in the web browser. If you also make design changes, they are being reflected in the web browser also. So yeah, view page source, inspect element, you can make changes there as a designer, especially in inspect element, on how you feel certain features to work on the website. So how can a designer begin contributing to open source? So this is like the big question here. How exactly can a designer begin contributing to open source? So this is it. The GitHub Issues tab is the best place to start out. What if it's open source is talking about, the best place to start out is the GitHub Issues tab. Even as a designer, as a developer, as documentation engineer, whatever the role is, the best place to contribute and start out is visiting the Issues tab. So first things first, you're going to have to evaluate a chosen project's workflow, client usability, color combination, every design-related component before you even think about, okay, let me see if I can contribute to this. No, so your first thing is to evaluate basically everything about the project, the workflow, that's the UX, the client usability, also UX, color combination, that's basically the UI and every basic design-related changes and components on the web page. You have to evaluate all that and make a proper documentation of what you think can be better. Just make the documentation on a Google Doc or a Notion document, and just note those things out that you would want to improve on this product, on this open source project. Then moving on, never start a feature without consulting one of the project authors. It's a valid ad, and if it's a valid ad, and if it can also be improved. So sometimes we tend to, as open source people, we tend to just jump right into open source and not really communicate with the maintenance of the project. If this PR we're about to open, if this pull request we're about to push out there on the project is a valid ad and it's not already being worked on, it would be so sad that we can push a PR straight to the website and that PR gets closed. Why did they get closed? Because somebody else is already working on it and we never knew. It's always best to communicate with the maintenance of the project. If so, I have this issue out there, and you can do that. So GitHub just released a feature called GitHub discussions, where you can have this kind of discussion. But before now, we always have these discussions under the issues tab. So you name the issue, you give a proper documentation of the issues and what you think can work, then ask if this is a valid ad. Then you get a response saying, great, thanks for suggesting this. Yeah, you can work on this. Then you continue chat probably over Twitter or somewhere and just make the improvements, basically. But you have to communicate with the owners of the project. That's very important before you start contributing anything at all to a project. Next is coming up with alternative design patterns for 1 minute. Okay, so yeah, coming up with alternative design patterns, but raising an issue in relation to why, how, and timeline. I believe I've spoken a lot about this in the last slide. So you come up with alternative, like basically what can be improved, you document it, and basically you raise an issue, name the issue, give a proper documentation of the issue. Yeah, that's simple. It's not hard at all. Next thing is some companies don't really want to like they just don't want designers. So like what to really convince these people is when they can see a prototype of the design. So one other thing you can do to enable this thing is prototype your design and let them get to see the prototype of the design on how it can work and how it actually work right now and how it can work in the future. So if they can see this alone can convince them. So you can also prototype your designs if you really want to really contribute to that project. So these are just basically some crappy things that some engineers say about designers that are really wrong, that shouldn't be like never approved. So let's go. So design is an ideology, not a profession. This is wrong. Design basically is the personality of your project. It needs to speak. So this is something that I just thought about one time. You can screenshot this and tweet if you like. Basically, design is the personality. When people see your project, your design, your UI needs to interact with the people that are seeing it. That's basically how I need to see UI and I need to be okay. this is really amazing. Like I really want to use this product because why? It's really appealing to the eye and it's really useful. Yeah. If the end product is called lazy software, why can't designers code? So this is a really funny question that some people say sometimes, and it's really wrong and shouldn't be said by anyone. Design is design, and developers are developers. So design is one of the most sufficient, significant department while building startup products and also working on an open source project. No matter what you're working on, a startup, a company, a product, whatever it is, an open source project, design should never be undermined, should never be insignificant to your company or your project. It's very important that design is good. Yeah, I spoke about the inspect element and the web inspector on how you can live debug in CSS. So when you inspect element, you can make changes in the inspect element, and those changes you make automatically reflect in the web browser itself. Then you just take a screenshot of the page and send to the person saying, okay, I think this design will work better this way after writing the CSS, if you can. Because I'm a bit out of time, I wouldn't be able to do this demo. I would so much love to do this demo, but I was going to show you how to use the inspect element, but I'm kind of out of time, so I wouldn't be able to do this demo. So basically, when you just right click, you just click on inspect element. Okay, you click on the, let's say button, for example, you click on the button, then you go to your CSS, you can change whatever you want in your CSS and automatically reflects on the web browser. It's that simple. If you're having any issues, we're doing this, we're testing this out, you can send me a DM on WhatsApp, not Twitter, as develop.io. That's my handle. My DM is opened. Just send a DM that you're having issues with it, and I'm gonna give you a walkthrough on how to fix it. Next, one other important thing that should be introduced is, I believe should be introduced, is version control, which is the version control, which is already available, something like that, but it's kind of like design history. That's what we have right now. But then we want like version control, something like Git for designers. This is something that is already in the works with Adobe. Adobe should be releasing something like this really soon for the Adobe XD and other platforms they have for designers that can easily enable them to be, enable designs to be automatically converted to SVG and being pushed to GitHub, and also imported designs which are SVG directly back into Adobe XD. So designing for multiple devices and responsiveness, very important. You must one other thing that you need to do for as designers to convince people about open source is you need to design for multiple devices. Number one, which is the desktop. Number two, which is the mobile version. Very important that you can do this. Next thing is start writing documentation for designers and to see and follow. It's a trend, someone has to start. So if you don't start something, definitely no one is willing to start, because you need to start writing documentation so other designers can see the documentation and follow. If no one starts, definitely no one starts. Someone didn't start because they believe someone else would, and at the end, no one ends up starting until a couple of years later, when everything was meant to be like, let's say like 5 years ago. So one eternity later, boom, documentation is now today. So start contributing documentation and let's see how that goes. So next we're going to talk about tools. So what exactly are some of the tools that we can use?
It's 7 o'clock.
Open source? Let's look at those ones. So for design, we have Figma, we have Adobe XD, we have Sketch. There are others, but these are the three most significant ones. Others are significant, but in this case, these are just the basic three that I feel that you should really use right now for if you are designing something. Either Sketch, Adobe XD, or Figma. So for prototyping, it's really great to prototype with InVision Studio, Adobe XD, Organic Studio, Sketch, Webflow, Framer, Zeppelin, FlowMap. These are really great prototyping tools. You can request for the slide later for this list that I have up here, so you can take a look at them. So for design and collaboration, the Zeppelin is very perfect for that. For design and collaboration, it's perfect. You can also collaborate on Slack, collaborate also Figma and InVision. But then I use at my office, I use Zeppelin to communicate with the designer when working on their UI. So yeah, resources were not openly distributed as it is today. As we see on the internet, resources are everywhere. We should have people writing, we should have people creating video content, running workshops, conferences, writing research articles, and lots more. We should have people doing all of these things together. So today is the best time to start contributing open source as a designer, and I believe you should start right now. By how? Okay, go to github.com, pick a project that you love, go to the issues tab and start up something. What's the issues there? Evaluate the website on what exactly can be improved as a designer, and open an issue on that project. Then wait for the maintenance to comment. Then that basically is open source. I believe you should start now. So visit github.com and start. So these are some resources that you can check out of some companies who contribute open source. So we have opensource.org, opensourcedesign.net, open source community Africa. Is force that's free and open source. We have Facebook open source, Google open source, Microsoft open source, and Twitter open source. So they have a whole bunch of open source projects that you can contribute to, that you can take a look at and get started. So yeah, thank you very much for coming to this session. Super excited to have you here. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Shodipo. We apologize that, yeah, we know that you're really in a rush, and we apologize for that. But if anyone has some questions with regards to design and open source, please feel free to ask. You can raise your hand and just ask the question. Or if you have any questions with regards to open source in general, just ask.
You could also contribute to Angular. So Google has some. So we have Angular itself. So Angular itself is open source on Google. On Google open source, that's like if you go to their GitHub, you get to see Angular projects there and some plugins, some packages, libraries. You can contribute to those also. Even as a designer, you can. There are ways to do that. At least those that has UI that has a front end like a client side, the users can see. You can also contribute to that too. Yeah. Okay. Since you're not,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah. No one
Okay.
has any questions? Open source design before we let Shodipo leave. Okay, check that as a no. All right. Yeah, today's session was a bit short because it wasn't much, and also Shodipo has some few things he was also working on, but he took his time and took us to design open source. He'll definitely avail the slides. I don't know if that's possible, Shodipo.
Yes, it will. I will send the slides to you later today.
Okay, sure, yeah. And yeah, as he told you, get started with open source. Just check out the various resources that he's provided, and then see where you can get started. You don't have to code, by the way, in order to start contributing to projects. You can even, I've seen even people just probably doing typos, clearing typos, and all that. So please do not be afraid of open source whenever you hear about open source. Thank you, Shodipo. Thank you for taking your time to take us through this, and we hope to see you probably next time. And
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
yeah. All right, guys.
Everyone.
Yeah, so next week we'll be having another session, so just be on the lookout for more details on our Twitter channel. All right, guys. Have a good night, and we'll be sharing this video later with everyone else. All right. All right. Bye, guys.